You.
Awesome. Thank you, Rod. Channel Focus is right around the corner. So this is actually our last webinar before Channel Focus on October 7th through the 9th in Dana Point, California. It's going to be full of updates regarding the future of the channel ecosystem, AI, and all the topics that you want to hear about. If you're interested in coming, we do have a special offer that ends this Friday. So if you book today, you will save $400 on your registration, no code required. We also have something awesome going on at Channel Focus. We have the Channel Focus Awards, which includes the Women's Leadership Awards as well as the Channel Leadership Awards. We have an amazing group of nominees. Please, your voice is what decides the winners. So please scan this QR code and cast your vote for who you'd like to see win. And then I will go back over to you, Rod, to introduce the panelists.
Excellent. I'm going to be very brief on this one. So I will start with Ellen Lincolnhofer. And Ellen, if you'd like to tell us just a little bit about yourself and your company.
I appreciate it, Rob. So as he said, I'm Ellen Lincolnhofer. I work at ITA Group in our channel incentives area of business. We do a lot of different things, but specifically I'm here to talk a lot more about incentives and compensation models. We specialize in engagement programs, motivation, and loyalty, and we do that through a mixture of incentives, behavior modification incentives, sales incentives, and also gamification. So that's the background that we have. See a lot of different industry solutions, and I'm excited to share some of those learnings with all of you. Thanks, Rod.
Yeah. And James, if you'd like to tell us a little about yourself and 360, that would be fabulous.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm James Hodgkinson, Senior Vice President of Ecosystems with 360 Insights. So 360 Insights is a leader in incentives management and ecosystem orchestration technology. And I work very closely with our community of clients, partners, and solution providers to really work out how to connect the dots in a way that really translates into business impact. And incentives play a key role in this because I think the alignment of how you can use incentives against the different motions that we're starting to address within the ecosystem is a critical piece of success. So looking forward to chatting through all of that today.
Excellent. And Ken, if you'd like to come in and talk to us about yourself and Channel Scale Up.
Thanks very much, Rod. Great to be here. So Kenneth Fox, Channel Scaler. Yeah, and a large part of what we do is we, work with our customers, vendors globally, hundreds of them who run their incentive programs through our platform. So yeah, very much looking forward to the discussion. I suppose sharing some of those real life customer use cases. How do they tailor those incentives through their channel to ultimately drive the desired behaviors of their business? That's a very, it evolves all the time, probably faster than ever, with all the different partner types, targeting everything from the partner entity to the individuals at the partners to incentivize them to achieve what that particular vendor wants to achieve. So looking forward to sharing some of that.
Excellent. And Casey, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Merits.
Hi, everyone. I'm Casey Epley, and I represent our incentive and loyalty solutions with Merits. Really happy to be here. So the Merits brand runs really broad and really deep, spanning from things like channel incentives to B2C rewards and incentive trip execution. But at the core, it's all about motivating people and engaging them and helping businesses grow. And so for today, we do have a long-standing expertise in incentive programs, about 130 years of incentive expertise. But today, in the modern era, what we deliver is engaging incentive platforms, really amazing rewards, data-backed consulting, all of that to help customers answer those questions like, what should my incentive program look like? How should we be engaging our partners? How can I build loyalty? And ultimately, how can I drive more sales through my incentive platform, my incentive program as a really great lever? So excited to talk about some examples today that hit on all the topics that are top of mind for your audience. So thanks for having me.
Fabulous. And once again, if everyone could chip in and come in with comments, etc., that would be fabulous. But let's get this cracking. And James, I'll start with you. The topic is, how do you create a compensation and incentive model that addresses the needs of multiple different partner types? If you've got VARs, MSPs, distributors, GSIs, all part and parcel of your program, how do you approach that when you design a compensation model, and how do you take account of all of those different types?
Yeah, so I think the answer to that question, at least from the viewpoint of what we're learning from our clients and the challenge as it's evolving, is that we have to start to think about programs, I think, a little differently as well, because traditionally in the established channel routes to market, it was quite easy to identify personas and put labels on those personas and talk about MSPs versus VARs, etc. But now it's starting to become more complex in that we are seeing many more moments and touch points and motions around the end customer, which can often involve different players, non-transactional influencers, or maybe multiple partners working together on certain objectives, and a convergence between internal sellers and channel partners and co-selling strategies and all the rest of it. So I think it's impossible to create a program and an incentive and compensation strategy that can really address all of those variables as a holistic whole. What we're starting to see now is, how do you actually build incentive and compensation strategies more around the motion of the go-to-market objective. So if your goal is to achieve X outcome with a client using these partners, these internal sellers, and these external influencers, how do you create incentive structures to identify and reward that behavior in a way that's a lot more personalized and specific to the outcome you're trying to achieve? And I think one of the big benefits of this is that you start to also see then a more adoption from the participants in the incentive programs, because if it's more relevant to them and they're not being asked to take generic training to achieve entitlements, or they're not being asked to go through certain hoops in your channel program to reach certain levels of tiers, it's more of what's in it for me and how does this relate to the business objective we have together. And that's leading us into how you can use more modernized incentive strategies, for example, the use of points and rewards at both individual and company level, to really try and drive those behaviors that really influence those business outcomes. So that's a kind of high level viewpoint, and I'm sure we'll dig into more specific examples as we go.
Absolutely. And Casey, you've been doing this, or Maritz have been doing this for over 100 years. This is complex. What's your advice for the audience in terms of how to tackle this? Because obviously you can go broad brush and just fire a shotgun at everyone, or you can be much more specific. How would you caution the audience to address the issue?
Yeah, we want to avoid that one size fits all approach. And so when we consult with clients, one of the tools and the frameworks that we use might be something like a behavior matrix. And so if you've got an understanding of all your partner types, if you've ever done like a persona mapping exercise, it's really beneficial to look at all the people, all the folks and the entities in your ecosystem and understand them across a couple different layers. And it might be, as James was mentioning, about the value they create, but also what are their business models and the value that what are they striving for? So they have particular motivations as a business entities, but also as individual humans themselves. So you might look at what are the motivations of these different personas or partner types. Then you might be mapping that to what are the behaviors that lead to the most successful selling outcomes, and also the most successful non-selling outcomes, because you've got steps to the sale, as you may be familiar with. So we can certainly track transactions and revenue, but there's a lot of things that happen before deal close that we want to encourage and reward and recognize and potentially even incentivize. And so if you can understand that at the partner level across your matrix, that could help you lead to, so therefore, what are my incentives? So how should I be motivating those particular behaviors, from renewals to customer satisfaction scores, things that might span training certification. So how do I get those behaviors? And the answer might be different types of rewards. It might not be payouts. It might be something more flexible, something more symbolic, something more interesting that might live in your points program. So laying out
give some examples of those, if you would, Casey. What sort of things are we talking about?
Some of the rewards specifically, or the incentives?
Yeah.
Or either. Yeah. So you would look at, spiffs across particular transactional rewards, of course, if you're doing promotions. But if you're trying to encourage different training, for example, that type of reward might be something that behavior might not be best used to do. Like, you wouldn't be able to calculate a rebate payout on a training incentive, for example, because that calculation just, doesn't exist. And so if you're looking at things that are related to transactions and volumes, those calculations are very easy to translate. But if if you're looking at something that's a little bit more complex and you want to be able to reward for behaviors that are not related to any money that's coming in, something that is a little bit more action-based, then you might just be able to issue a points payout that's a little bit more flexible. So you might be able to weight those behaviors. And so if you don't have a dollar amount associated with the transaction, you might be able to say what it's worth to you. So you might be able to identify a point value for those behaviors, that every time the partner conducts that behavior, it's something that they earn on the other side. That might be one example.
Okay, and Ken, want to bring you in. I've got multiple partner types. I'm trying to build a program. This could get horribly complex. How do I keep it simple? Because my partner doesn't want to jump through 1,000 hoops to get to where they need to be.
Yeah, no, great question. And I think, what to say, everybody can make things complex, not everybody can make things simple. So yeah, it's a really important point and something we put a lot of work into. So when the partner comes to your portal or their rebate or their spiff or incentive, whatever it is, it must be very clear to them, this is what I've earned and why I'm earning it and so on. So to try and, I suppose, give some real life examples of that, we start with, the traditional rebates, which now are very varied across your partner type. So, whether it's your VAR, your distributor, your MSP, moving right up into ISVs in the marketplace, they all get now rewarded differently. So starting with I suppose the most common ones and the high volume ones, which are around they're earning dollars. So when that partner comes on, you must show it to them in a very visual way. What dollars have they the potential to earn? How can they earn those, whether it's, registering deals, closing business, taking training, or overlaying all of those in a single view. So from a simplicity point of view, the programs themselves can be quite complex. Presenting them in a simple, easy to consume way through a visual dashboard is kind of how we tackle that, and the partners really like it. And you want partners to keep coming back, engaging with the program. So if you can think about something like, a quarterly incentive program, 13 weeks, they need to see week on week how they're doing against that program. Turn the other side of that coin and you start talking about, okay, now I've got my account managers from the vendor who's running those particular programs. They also need to understand and see how are all of my partners doing? Is the program working? Is it not working? But not just across one partner type, across all of the partner types, and they can be very different rewards, very different calculations, driven off different data. So yeah, it can get very complex, and that's, I suppose, where the platforms that are in the ecosystem now that can help our customers with things like that. And then taking it down to, I suppose, the next example would be, now I want to go past the partner entity or entities, and I want to start targeting individuals. How do I do that? And again, it must be simple. If I'm getting paid for registering a deal or taking a training course or attending an event or whatever it is that the behavior that you're trying to influence, I must be able to show the individual at the partner entity, first of all, what it is that they can earn. And again, do that in a simple way. And secondly, as they earn it, congratulate them, send them the notification, show them a little needle moving up. You've earned points, you've earned dollars. And I would say the last thing on both of those is, and this matters a lot, is the actual payment of the dollars, the points, the rewards, whatever it is that you're paying. It's really, really, really important that, vendors pay out quickly. You're trying to influence partners to do things for you as a vendor, sell more, train more, etc. Ultimately, it's all about more revenue at the end of the day. So you must pay very quickly. Otherwise, they forget what they're getting paid for. They get a check, they get cash lodgement, whatever it is. If they can't relate that to the action that you wanted them to take, they're not going to remember, they're not going to do it again. So there's some of the challenges, Rod.
Brilliant. And we've got a great question coming in from Matthew. Matthew, I'll tackle that in just a moment, but I just want to cover off again the simplicity issue. Ellen, creating a simple program for a problem that is actually very complex. What's your advice also on what people should be doing here?
Yeah, a lot of good points have been made. I would always anchor back to those business objectives you're trying to do. Like, certainly some portion of your budget is going into just having a relationship, doing business together, but then you should be shifting those things around based on what you're trying to accomplish. And that's how I would change your incentive models as well. So if you're trying to increase adoption in a specific type of partner or a specific market region product set, like try to think about what behaviors or outcomes you're trying to change and then focus your incentives there. These are meant to move the needle. And there's a component of that dollar or that point or whatever you're doing to reward that behavior. But then figuring out, is it actually working for you? So don't be afraid to have kind of that baseline amount that they're earning, maybe through those rebates, those agreements, those co-sell opportunities. But then as you reach that individual level, simplify, I think, more in like, what are you wanting them to do? Maybe break down those program silos. I think we saw a lot of walls put up between those partner types, between an MSP, a VAR, a GSI, those different types maybe don't need to be as segregated as they once were if you're really focusing on like, okay, I'm in this influence stage. I'm looking for behaviors like lead generation, referrals. Great. Anybody could really do that if they wanted to. So why not reward them equally? So I think the way that I would and simplifying this is really boiling it down to where are they playing? What do you want them to do? And truly, should everyone have access to this type of motion that you're trying to make? And that's one way that I think you can start to simplify your program is if you can boil it down to some of the things that they're all doing or perhaps aspirationally want to do.
Brilliant. And Matthew has a great question. It didn't take long for us to look at AI. So anyone can come in on this one. Have any of the speakers used technology or AI to drive more personalized incentives, or at least incentive recommendations to align partner value motion to desired behaviors? If so, how did you use technology to put the guardrails in place and ensure incentives were equitable across partners and stayed in line with budgets? Who would like to jump? It's a very important question. Who would like to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I'll start, Rod. So yeah, yes is the answer. So kind of more around the attribution. So, when a user or partner logs again, just, based on the characteristics or attributes of that partner or the person at the partner, and that could come down to what partner type they are, which programs then that's relevant to, where they're at the stage in the program, and then literally using that to point them in the right direction, basically, that if you do one more deal, if you do another 5K or whatever it is, guess what, you earn this. That's kind of on the partner facing side. And then on the vendor facing side, it's again using that AI capability to figure out who are the best fit partners based on their attribution for those programs. Who can I target that potentially sold into this end customer type before, has certs that have engineers or SEs, etc., with that capability to sell this product or promote this product. So they're just a couple of quick examples of how we're solving that or using AI to help.
Brilliant. Who else would like to jump in on that one?
So I was
James.
going to say, yeah, a little bit from the perspective of the data that's needed to understand, how to interpret intelligence around incentives. So at 360 Insights, I mean, we have a lot of experience in the volumes, right? So it's obviously, billions of dollars of transactions, millions of dollars of POS records, and then on the engagement side, which participants in terms of personas, partners, consumers. And we've been for a long time working how to use the data to understand trends in behavior and the incentive efficiency of being able to motivate certain behaviors based on the data. And that can be also very time sensitive, where you're saying, oh, we've got a really key objective by end of quarter, we need to improve incentives to drive this behavior in this part of our channel with these partners by this date, right? So let's increase the investment in that. But there has always been this slight challenge of moving a little bit behind the speed of the business. And when you've interpreted the dashboards and you've looked at the data and you've talked to the program teams about how to actually do this, and then you've changed the payment plan and you've got the emails out, all of it is kind of a little bit last minute and sometimes too late. What we're now starting to see the AI opportunity is obviously the data is a living and breathing source of intelligence, and the decisions can be made or at least recommended without those layers of friction that previously existed. So instead of it being a multi-step human-enabled process to get to that same level of intelligence, you can start to connect the dots through AI in a way that could deliver an immediate recommendation or outcome and actually make decisions. So in the same way that, hotels are using AI now to adjust all of the pricing of inventory, and I'm hearing about flights that are going to be priced depending on who you are, which is kind of scary. I think we're seeing the same beginnings of this in channel incentives and the intelligence that we could use to say, okay, you really need to motivate these people to take this behavior at this moment based on these conditions in your business. So I wouldn't say we're all the way there yet, but one of the things we're most excited about at 360 is, like any AI, it's going to depend on the quality of the data and the volume that you have to actually make those decisions. And the ownership of the data and the ability to see it clearly across multiple brands is going to be a major forcing factor in the AI ability to leverage that information. And we're connecting more and more of that data for the industry.
Okay. Does anyone want to chip in on else want to chip in on this question before we move on?
Rod, I would contribute just a little bit. I know for us, we're very focused more on that short-term behavior. AI is really good at a lot of things. Sometimes complicated math and guardrails is not its best suited thing right now. So we go in with a little bit more healthy, I think, skepticism sometimes with, it's really, really good at providing motivation, getting that stickiness and engagement that you're looking for. So I see that more as like, hey, how can we better equip them on the participant side with some of those product features, or like, why should they do this? Or, hey, did you see this incentive? So serving up some context and relevance in their incentives and what they have eligible for is how we've been implementing this. And then I see it being used more as this short-term stopgap. Like I currently, and our programs, we don't trust it yet to put it in charge of a lot of programmatic, very like robust budgets. But in a short term, like, hey, you've been dormant. I think it's fine to have AI help recommend, hey, come back to the site. Here's an extra spiff for your referral. Like make it a finite budget, make it very trackable, make sure there's some human intervention components. But I know for us, we're looking for it to increase engagement, stickiness, and participation. We're still testing it out and making sure that we truly trust the guardrails and like the recommendations. Like I think we're not quite there yet where we want it necessarily running all of our budgets on its own, but I think someday we'll get there.
Okay. And Casey, if I can pull you in for a moment, one of the challenges that we have is increasingly getting involved in complex deals with more than one partner or entity involved in the deal. How do we deal with that? How do we gauge because obviously we're not going to go, hey, the incentive is X and now we're going to pay 7 times X because there's 7 entities involved. CFO might not be very happy if we did that. So how do we deal with those kinds of situations, and how do we make sure everyone understands what's happening?
Yeah, it's a challenge to accurately allocate like who has touched each deal and what was their appropriate impact on the closing of the deal, because there are many roles, many partner types that could be touching one deal close. So there's, common scenarios where you have the referral partner, it makes the introduction, you've got like some place where you're doing the transaction, you've got the VAR being the integrator, and then someone might be, the MSP might be managing post sale. And so sometimes these companies have to consider weighting the roles and their involvement, and it might be something where you give a little bit more to that transacting partner, a little bit less to the referral source. It depends on like how you want to weight those individually. But even if it isn't perfect, there is no perfect attribution to these different partners. Even if it isn't perfect, it's okay. Even something imperfect is better than not addressing that fact at all when you have multiple roles kind of dipping into the same pot. So you will at least want to try something. And then you might consider some kind of like auto allocation. If you do some weighting like that, like within your system, that's a really interesting and non-manual way to have that kind of play out on its own. So it really helps when the data is incomplete, but you still need to make decisions about which partners touch which deals and making sure they were recognized and paid out for contributing.
Okay. I want to get real specific now. So a quick answer from each of you. Big debate, points or cash? Where do you use both? Or do you just use one? So Ellen, starting with you, as I say, quick answer to that one. And I know it's a very complex issue.
I was just going to say yes and then elaborate. I would say that we have programs and clients that live in both worlds. Some that are like 100% cash, that's all I want. And then we have others that have definitely made that transition to points just because it's a more fluid currency. It can still be converted to cash. So that's the beauty of that. I think we always preach and practice like give yourself that flexibility. You can start with points and then certainly convert that into a direct deposit, to a cash card, to a merchandise, to like whatever you end up wanting to do that with. It just gives you a little bit more flexibility. But we also have instances where there are different budgets. They may be earning a certain amount that is always going to be direct deposited or rebated out at the end of the quarter, year, whatever that measure cycle is. And that's going to that partner entity level. Once we start to reach individual levels, we sometimes see a shift to more points or a points plus cash kind of combination. Yeah, I would say it really is going to come down to the relationship you have or what part of the channel you're touching and what those expectations are, and then also the behaviors you're asking them to do. So sometimes you don't always want them to know it's going to be $5, $1, $10, $100, $1,000 for whatever behavior they're taking. And that's where sometimes points or different motivation tactics become really valuable, so that there's some satisfaction in achieving those things without necessarily having to equate that to a dollar amount. So I think there's a place for both. You should probably have both, but how you do that is going to get little nitty gritty.
Same question for you, Ken.
Yeah, I'll even go further on. It's points, it's cash, it's free discounts for things like training, depending on the partner type. But the vast majority of what we do is cash. I think the old thing of cash is king is still very true. You know, partners, the entities definitely want cash. Depending on where you are in the world, the spiffs, cash seems to work really well. I think when you move into the points, it's probably more longer term loyalty programs, which is great. And then when you move into things like the GSIs, you're into, you know, POCs, dev support, sandboxes, events, attendance, enablement credits, and so on and so forth. So yeah, a variation of most, but vast majority that we see is certainly cash.
Okay. And James, same question to you.
Yeah, so I think it's clearly both, because obviously your incentive types and your strategy is going to delineate what the kind of currency of reward is. So if it's a very transactional aspect where there is an expectation of shared revenues or rebates or whatever, then cash is clearly going to be king. But the answer to program design for me is points led, right? Because I think if you are trying to design programs or you're trying to design incentives around motions, like I was describing previously, around more of a value exchange where you do this, you get this in return, and you can continue to drive behavior that way, you can always create a motion of conversion from points back to cash, or redemptions that can be both physical, you know, in terms of payment, or more business benefit related. But points give you a way of putting relative values on behaviors, and you can't really do that with cash because not everything is convertible to cash, right? So I think points give you more flexibility, and I think the other important thing to bear in mind as well is some people cannot be paid, right? You can't always say we're going to pay for somebody to do something. We look at incentives even through the lens of customers and employees, and you can give everybody value of some kind, but you can't always pay people. And in some cases, you specifically can't for compliance and other reasons. So I think points are the future of the flexibility of programs, but cash clearly plays a key role in many incentive types today.
Okay. And Casey?
Yeah, it's both. Cash is really hard to do away with. I don't see it going away anytime soon. It's kind of the lifeblood, and some partners rely on it in such a significant way that changing to a points program that didn't allow them to transfer to cash may be detrimental to their business or the salary they're taking or something like that. So it's really important to understand as you're doing program design at the upfront to see how you might want to change that over the future. But the flexibility of points, we love this idea of collapsing all of your incentive streams into kind of one currency, many ways to earn. We find that our clients and our customers love that flexibility. And then even outside of a point system, non-monetary rewards and recognition in the place where you can't pay out, even in points, has been a way to bring in that idea of recognition, rewards, exclusive access, different advisory boards, things like that can be looked at as part of an incentive program to gain extra engagement without actually having to use a ton of money to do that. So you've got a lot of levers at your disposal when you're talking about points, cash, and non-monetary as well.
Okay, and we got another question coming in. Someone could quickly come in and answer this. Based on your experience, is the optimal timing for Q1 incentive program launches, considering internal planning cycles, budget approvals, strategy alignment, etc.? What recommendations do you have for balancing corporate planning timelines with partner market expectations? I bet that is someone looking at the end of the year and thinking, I want to launch something on the 1st of January, but our programs internally, our budgets internally are not set then. So what's anyone want to jump in? What's your advice on that one?
I can take it first and then feel free to jump in. I always hound that communication is one of the most important things you can do, because you can launch an incentive and if nobody knows about it, nobody cares. So if you know that you will eventually have the budget, I would start talking about it in your Q1. You can still tease it or launch it. Maybe you don't have all the specifics, but you know it's going to be this kind of product software mix set. You know these are going to be the general timelines. I would also ask you, if we were to have this conversation in person, a little bit more around like your sales cycle. I do think sometimes we see promotions spun up with a very specific time frame, but your sales cycle for that specific product or software, whatever you're selling or trying to get done, if the sales cycle is longer than a quarter, you're not actually going to impact any new deals more than likely. So I would also ask you some questions around like, what are you trying to get done? And do you need that launch, or are you just wanting something to launch? So I think there's different ways around it if you don't have all of the dots crossed, the, or what is it? T's crossed and I's dotted internally quite yet. I'm curious my counterparts' thoughts on that.
Okay, anyone else want to come in quickly on we move on?
The time is going to depend in cases also on your ability to systematically execute, right? Because if you're doing a lot of manual steps involved, then how do you actually bring incentives and operationalize them? So obviously systems and tools can play a key role in kind of expediting those launch timeframes, but I think there is internal change management aspects. I mean, you know that have to be, if it's a new program, so you've got to be working, I would say, you know, at least a quarter ahead of when you expect to have impact, but the speed to actually execute is going to depend a lot on how scalable your ability to run incentives programs can be, I think.
Excellent. And we got a couple of other questions coming in. I'll come to those in just a moment. But Ken, if I can bring you in on this one, which is talking to a partner the other day, have about 100 employees, about 40 salespeople on the team, and the answer from the partner was, I want to dictate what my salespeople sell. I don't want the vendors to do that. So any programs I'm involved in have to come through corporately, and I will then redistribute them. How do you handle that? Because I'm sure that comes up on numerous occasions.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. So, you know, that again, you know, that certainly sounds more like a SPIF type program that you're referring to there, where certain companies and certain geographies will say, no, you can't pay our staff directly. We're not going to allow you to spiff them directly. We want to dictate how that motion works. So what we've seen and what we do, I suppose, there, and it's often a thing that turns companies off. They think they can't do it, but they actually can. You can pay the spiff to the company. In fact, I've never seen a scenario where they won't take it. And then you work with them, they can allocate that to their staff how they see fit to do so. And we often see that. And you'll even see they do drawdowns, you know, typically around the holiday periods as well. And that works really well. They still fit into your overall global program structure. So if you think about the spiff, you know, it's, you know, you might be paying that out into individuals at one partner company in one region, and in another region, you may be paying it out to the company entity. But if I'm a vendor running that program, it still gives me that global concept that I can consistently run that program across all my partners. I know what my budget requirements is. Everything is still calculated the same. It's just the payout mechanism to certain partners is slightly differently. And again, our experience is I've never yet seen a partner opt out of a program like that.
Okay. Casey, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, one thing that we have seen where you have partners who may be on both sides of the fence, like some who will allow you to incentivize down to the seller and the transacting partner, and others who won't. And it would be really interesting to have inside of your incentive platform the ability for those business entities to opt in or out, and even self-register to say these individuals at my company or these individuals with this role type are eligible and these are not. And so you might have some administrative hurdles to overcome with that, but we know that every partner does need to be considered about their individual business. And so if your incentive platform has that flexibility around enrollment eligibility rules, and even like pushing that down to letting them decide who to auto enroll and who to upload, that could be a way to make sure that the decisions are happening in the right places for that.
Okay. And James, I'm gonna push Humza's question your way. My company has products with deal sizes varying from 1,000 one-day cycle to $1 million 2-year cycle, and over a dozen different types and sizes of channels. And I know this could be an answer that lasts for about 2 days, but if we could try and sum it up, different sizes and channel, what are your thoughts on how we should structure a channel incentive program?
So that's a good question. I think I'm going to try and answer this one also combining what I was going to say to the previous one, right? Because I think Ken's comments on, the change of motion was really interesting, right? You're just paying the same outcome, but you're allowing the company to personalize their use of that investment. And I think when you take it to this more complex example of the variance in the different relationships and deal sizes and so forth, what we're starting to see the beginnings of now, I think, is more personalized incentives development where it could be developed around the partnership rather than the program. So I talked before about, there's motions, but what we have seen, and we're in some really interesting client conversations about this right now, where they have big enough investments in partnerships to say, look, there's a business plan here, there's an annual marketing plan, and there's a whole bunch of objectives we have. And we're used to seeing the use of things like MDF to fund those plans, but we haven't always linked to the granular incentive strategies to those same plans. We tended to treat those as different things. So what we're starting to see now is, what if there's an investment commitment that we can make within partnerships, and the end partner has some say in how they want this to be working based on their business model. So this can work particularly well with large partners, and we're starting to see the overlap now with co-sales strategies and the bringing in of like multiple teams to address joint sales accounts. So could we fund more the sales play and the people involved in it, and the use of the dollars that we're investing into the partnership to achieve certain outcomes? So if you have variability then in the relationships, then you can design for that. And then you could have more standard programs and offerings for the longer tail, where you say, look, for every X $1,000 deal you bring us, we return this amount of revenue to you. So I think this is again back to the same theme of the one size fits all problem, but can you now start to design incentives programs to support business outcomes even within the goal of one relationship, right? Because that is new thinking a little bit when it comes to combining the different incentive types to achieve those goals.
And would you look within that, James, incentivizing, say you've got a 2-year sales cycle, and anyone else can jump in on that one, incentivizing the steps in that sales cycle?
Well, exactly. And I'll use the example of co-selling because we're doing some really interesting work with some other tech companies on this right now. But it's like, if the whole forward indicator of revenue is you must learn how to co-sell, you must understand this route to market, you must connect the shared data, you have to create personalized marketing assets to go and execute that objective. There's a lot of steps along the way to actually realize revenue. So eventually you can say the goal here is to generate $5 million additional pipeline with your customer segments to close this much amount of business. But how do you build an incentive strategy to motivate that entire motion, not just the end result, right? Because I think it does take various layers of joint investment to get to outcomes of that nature. And we're starting to see the beginnings of I have to come back to AI because the variables involved were too varied, if you like, before to say, well, we couldn't necessarily create marketing campaign assets that are specifically designed to help that partner sell to that end customer. But you're starting to see this is possible now. So if you can start to think about how to layer incentives onto these kinds of strategies and these marketing plans, I think then they're going to have a lot more impact than just generic programmatic incentives. So I'm not saying that anyone is there yet, but we're talking to clients who are starting to understand the potential of that type of thinking, and the technology enablement of it is obviously a key piece of it.
Okay. And Ellen, we're talking about incentives and what we're going to give people, etc. I'm a recipient of those incentives. I want two things. I want clear communication of what I'm going to get, and I want a place to go where I can see where I'm at. What specific advice would you have for people on the call in terms of A, the communication, and B, how do you get that information really clearly and concisely to the person who is going to receive the incentive?
Yeah, I actually imagine we probably would all have very similar answers, but this just comes back to that user portal, and whether or not I've noticed that there tends to be some disparate portals. You have your marketing portals, your programmatic portals, your incentive portals, and sometimes it's even just making sure that some of those data points live across them. But if they're specifically looking for earnings and communications around incentives, again, just make sure that your widgets are actually tracking those things. If they have goals, track their goals. If they are looking for what has been earned in the last 3 months, the reporting becomes a really big thing. If they're looking for status on a referral, or maybe if they're looking for, are they attached to the deal reg? Like, just serving up the information they're looking for in the right way is really compelling. In terms of communication, I think sometimes it's just reminding them to go where to look. I know we have surfaced even dashboard views and KPIs and metrics down to a participant level or a field team level, but they don't always know how to find them or use them. And so sometimes it's translating how to find and what those data points mean to their earnings. And when I think about communication, I think repetition is key, but you also want to make sure it's relevant. Like, don't be noisy. Make sure they're finding them or offering them or explaining things to them in a way that is most compelling for them. And that is not always email. So I, again, would encourage you to kind of think differently about, are you texting them for only specific things that are super important? Is it a direct mail? There's just a lot of different ways to make sure that you're communicating appropriately. And I will say that I think this is one of the most common failing points I see, is that you spend so much money on your incentives, on your platform, on your program, on your end marketing, that the communication budget, time, and effort spent to actually explain to your partners how to use something is sometimes forgotten. So please, please don't forget that you need probably at least a month of communication and market before incentives are going to be adopted widely, especially if they are busy and working with other providers.
Okay. And Ken, if I can bring you in, what are some of the cool things you've seen your clients doing to A, communicate the incentives, and B, make sure that the person who's the potential recipient of those incentives actually gets the information they need really easily?
Yeah. So Eileen done a great job, covered most of it, but just a few snippets to add to it is, again, that visualization or ease of experience, that when you do get them there, and it's not always easy to get them there, it's that make it really intuitive, easy to understand, because once they're trying to figure it out, I suppose you're losing straight away. So, and that can be hard, as I said at the start. Making it easy is always a challenge. So we all put a lot of work into that to ensure that partner experience is really simple. The second piece is then making sure your own account teams, your own internal folks understand it, because sometimes these programs can be quite complicated, and if your CAMs, PAMs, whatever you call them, don't understand it, then they obviously are the ones on the front line with the partners, that they need to understand it as well. So again, we do a lot of work on making it easy for those folks to understand, so they can in turn explain it to the partners, because as Eileen said, again, emails don't always land, they don't always work, they don't always get open even when they do land. One of the other things we do then, probably lastly, is around when we launch one of those programs, very simple thing is just do 15-20-minute webinar with your partners, with your account teams, to literally take them through it. And it's, you do a couple of those, you record them, you share them out. It's amazing, simple trick that does drive traction. It does drive engagement.
Cool. And Casey, I'm going to bring you in now on a topic. My CFO is bearing down on me you're spending all this money on incentives. What are we getting for it? How do you measure? What are some pointers for the people on the call in terms of measuring, justifying, showing ROI on the program?
This is where tying back to your business objectives really matters. Your incentive program has to be visible and seen by your C-suite, by your strategic direction as a company. So those things should be aligned. That would make things a lot easier to prove ROI and prove points that the incentive program is connected to the business goals. And so you need really strong data analysis or access to the data to help you kind of prove out your points. And so if you've got your KPIs, of course, you're going to measure revenue, but you might also be entering new markets, or you might be going after new partners where you really want to up the training certifications for the year. You've decided as a company that you need to bring in more partners who are more highly trained and able to service those accounts. And so that's the goal for, the quarter or the year. And so that would be the thing that you measure on, and you would be able to track the certifications, track the incentives related to certifications, and report back out to your C-suite that X goal that we decided together during business planning has been met through the program. So you might have 10 or 20 different ideas like that sit inside of your program connected back to those goals. So definitely measuring revenue, but as long as you've got all your data in a good place to where you can do some analysis and prove it out, you should be able to report back to the C-suite on that, with all the behaviors being weighted as important back to the business goals.
Okay, and we're almost out of time, so I'm just going to round robin a question to everyone, bearing in mind the topic: how do you create a compensation incentive model that addresses the needs of multiple different partner types? And I'll start with you here, Ellen. What would be your one piece of advice to the people on the call? What should they be thinking about? What's going to make that difference?
Yeah. The one thing I would have you really take a look back at is, what are you trying to achieve, and what are those behaviors you're looking for? I think that's going to probably answer a lot of your questions, and whether or not you can break down some of those silos, treat them the same, offer more simplified incentives. So once you can kind of boil that down to what are the behaviors, what motion are they doing with you, and how does that align to your business objectives, you'll be able to create some kind of compensation and incentive that's going to be meaningful, and not just the same old, same old.
Excellent. And James, same question to you.
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest viewpoint change is maybe not try to worry about creating an incentive strategy that's across the whole program or the whole partner community, and start to think more about using incentives specifically to motivate behavior. Because some of these problems that Ken was touching on around adoption, if it's generic, if it's blurry, and you've got 25 different vendors, this is very hard to get attention. And the investments can be very unstructured in terms of, we're splashing money here and there, but we don't really see the results, back to the CFO question. So if you almost say, look, let's look at it more from the point of view of where to apply incentives to achieve outcomes, and only invest where the business case is clear, strong, focused, and the participants involved will care about what you're doing. I think that's a different way to think about it than we should build a global incentives program that works for all partners. You should almost flip the thinking and start from there, and almost stop spending until you've worked that out.
Okay. And Casey?
Just building on that, I think allow yourself some time to look at your data and maybe come up with a pilot concept, because we are in a post-transactional world where I think we've all kind of moved past this idea of we're only incentivizing revenue dollars, and the transaction is all that matters. So in this post-transactional world, what does that mean? And looking at non-transacting partners and those behaviors, and you might need to figure that out for yourself. You might need to take one kind of pilot program and see if you can put that out to multiple partner types and see if it works, and then use those learnings to roll it out to multiple. So allow yourself some room to test, experiment, and really think truly about the behaviors, and start small. You don't have to do it for every single partner type and every single GTM motion. You can start small in one big area.
Excellent. And last, by no means least.
Yeah, again, not a lot to add, I suppose. think of the users that have to use it both internally and externally. Make sure that, you're serving it up to them in a way they can understand, that's easy to use. On the data side, if you're going to come up with a complex program, a simple program, check that you have the data to feed the system that can do the calculations. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult. It can't be run on a spreadsheet. That's why us guys exist on the bridge here. There's lots of great platforms to do these things now that serve it up to partners, that serve it up to account managers. This has gone beyond something you can just tell finance do as an aftermath. If partners are going to engage with you, they have to understand, what is on offer, what's the incentive, how do I earn that, how am I doing against that, what am I earning, and how do I get paid out? They're kind of key things in terms of ease of doing business you have to put front and center of your programs.
Excellent. Ellen, James, Casey, Ken, thank you so much for some absolutely terrific insights. And there will be a survey coming up as you leave the webinar. So please do spend a few moments completing the survey. We also spend a lot of time planning these webinars, and we create a very detailed talk track for them. And someone saw that for one of our previous webinars and asked if we could share that. So we will also be sharing that with everyone post-webinar. But a huge thank you again to Ellen, to James, to Casey, and to Ken. And thank you all for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.